Hello and welcome to a more perfect podcast. Today I'm going to be interviewing a photojournalist all the way from Ukraine, where Ukrainians have been fighting a valiant war against Russian invading forces for a week straight. The Ukrainians' courage has inspired the entire world as the Ukrainians hold back the Russian invaders, making them pay severely for every inch of Ukraine. With me today is Lourie, a photojournalist who has been to conflicts all over the world, including Iraq and Syria, as well as the riots and civil unrest which overtook the United States in 2020. His work has been featured in prominent publications such as the Rolling Stone, The Atlantic, and Time magazine. His website and Instagram will be featured in the podcast description if you're interested in his amazing, and I really do mean it, amazing photojournalism. If you like this interview, I encourage you to buy a subscription to Surfshark VPN, the sponsor of this show. You can get 2 free months and 82% off with the link in my podcast description. Without further ado, coming on the show all the way from Ukraine is Lourie. So, Alex, you have been on the ground in Ukraine for how long now?
So I landed in Ukraine, if I'm not mistaken, the 1st of February. I'm almost sure it was the 1st of February, give or take a day, but basically the very beginning of February. Basically like a month, exactly, just a month and change, a month and a day, something like that. I've been here.
Okay, so you were in Ukraine before the invasion. So before we start talking about the war that's going on right now, what was the feeling of the Ukrainian people and, the soldiers before the invasion? Did anyone anticipate that this was going to happen, or was everybody shocked when the Russian troops finally crossed into Ukraine?
Well, so that's an important point. And the invasion, this current invasion, of course, happened the early morning of the 24th, just after midnight on February 24th. But it's important to remember that Russia has been occupying parts of Ukraine and has invaded Ukraine since 2014, Crimea and in the Donbas region out east. Uniformed personnel of the Russian Federation have been doing that, and they've been here for 8 years. And when I say here, I mean Ukraine, obviously not this close to Kyiv. So that sheds a little bit of light on the Ukrainian mentality. They've been in this sort of frozen conflict for 8 years, up until a week ago, and they have a very large hostile neighbor, but you can't maintain a state of panic or heightened concern indefinitely. It's sooner or later that becomes a fact of life. And even for us journalists who were here for 3 weeks or so, we were kind of getting jaded. Be like, all right, is this, let's start thinking about, getting the flight back home. This looks like it was a big bluff. And, if we're doing that, then imagine having it be an 8-year-long ordeal and having the stakes be a lot higher. Like, if the stakes were higher, and if you're like, okay, if there's going to be an invasion, I have to get my whole family out of here, my pets, my job is over. Like, you can't be thinking about that every day.
Exactly.
And I don't want to say complacency, but it's similar to what I've heard people say, the Taiwanese or the South Koreans feel like. It's like, the American 24-hour news cycle has to, constantly be talking about these threats. But for a South Korean or a Taiwanese or Ukrainian, you can't panic every day. You can't panic every day like an American news consumer panics every day.
Gotcha.
And I would say, everybody, the most important thing I will say is that everybody's different. Everybody's an individual. And there's nothing that entitles me to speak for 40 million people who live in a country that I'm not from.
Oh, yeah, sure. I'm just asking, like what you've seen, and it sounds like
that's the vibe.
Yeah. Got you. All right. Wow. So they've been in this state of frozen conflict, and it sounds like everybody, the conflict, the imminent threat posed by the Russian forces was normalized, so to speak. Would that Would that be an accurate way of framing it?
Yeah, all day, every day. And it's not these past couple of months weren't the only time that there have been major Russian troop buildups on the border. This was obviously the largest, and we've seen what has come of it. But it's a dirty game that they've played for a while, like kind of a boy who cried wolf type situation.
Gotcha. So that was how the Ukrainian people were feeling before the invasion. Now, what's the feeling on the ground? Like, do they feel optimistic about their country? Are they negative? Do they think, the world's, like, the sky's going to fall down? Maybe a little bit of both. Like, what are they feeling now?
Again, first thing I got to say is everyone's an individual. There's 40 million people and 40 million reactions to this, roughly. A lot of people, especially people with pets, children, whatever, want to get out. There's been 1 million people displaced in the past week.
Wow.
Which is absolutely massive. I think the UNHCR, the United Nations Refugee Agency, is expecting it to be as high as 4 in the foreseeable future, 4 million. And so, obviously, people don't do that if they're not concerned. That's a huge indicator. But another huge indicator is how many people have joined what's called the territorial defense. Mostly men, and I don't have an official statistic, but it's definitely within the tens of thousands of people have grabbed a Kalashnikov and are now digging trenches, putting up barricades, and rallying to defend the country. So you have everything between, putting your pet in a cat carrier, grabbing as many of your possessions you could fit in a backpack, and getting on a train to Poland, or digging trenches at an intersection into Kyiv.
Wow.
You've got a whole bunch of different reactions. And as far as optimism, I think in general, they are Ukrainians, are extremely motivated and extremely prepared, both mentally and increasingly logistically and physically, to defend this place. There's absolutely no question of morale or determination. I haven't heard any real doomsaying or the Russians are gonna we all got to get out of here from anyone who's taken up arms to defend the place. I think whenever you deal with the military, young men, with their testosterone and uniforms, they like to be like, we can push them all the way back to Moscow or whatever.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, which, okay, fine. You'll encounter that in any military, but I think in general, they're just like, they're not getting in here. Like, they'll be shot at from every window. They'll be thrown at they'll have Molotovs thrown at them by by everyone. And, we're not letting this happen, basically, is the vibe.
Okay. That's incredible. We've certainly noticed here in the United States that like the courage of the Ukrainians. Everybody's taking note of Zelensky and his rhetoric. It's been absolutely courageous. It's been, to be frank with you, like the courage that the Ukrainians have is awe-inspiring. I can't imagine being in their situation, and I know how lucky I am to, live here in America and have the things that I have. It just makes me, it really tugs at your heartstrings to see what the Ukrainians are going through.
Yeah, they don't have another option, right? Like, if they lose this, like, they lose their homeland.
Yep.
It's not like an overseas, America. All of our fights have been overseas. It's for anyone who's alive today can remember, and with varying degrees of how existential those conflicts were to our country. But this one, there's no gray area, right? It's like, if you lose, like, you're occupied by a foreign power, period, end of discussion. Even if you're not picking up a Kalashnikov and doing that, like, we were at a shipyard where all the dock workers were, instead of repairing ships, they were making steel tank traps. You go to restaurants, and instead, obviously all the restaurants are closed now because of martial law, and instead the whole staff is there cooking gigantic cauldrons of soup to give to the soldiers. And it's so,
wow.
Yeah, so people, even if they're not grabbing a Kalashnikov and digging a trench, everyone's kind of or not everyone, many have fled, but many people have basically used whatever skill set they have and whatever resources they have to support the effort.
Just for anyone who doesn't know, what is a Kalashnikov?
Oh, it's a I don't know what gun terms, assault rifle, assault weapon, whatever.
It's a gun.
It's a gun. It's the Russian gun that, it's like every gun you ever see in any photo of any conflict. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I know what it is, but some of my viewers might not. So I just want to, make it clear for them, or some of my listeners might not.
It's a very common automatic firearm rifle thing.
Gotcha.
I'm not a gun nut. I don't know the terms.
I'm not either. I just quite frankly, I recognize it from playing Call of Duty. That's the extent of my gun knowledge, which is pretty much zero.
Yeah.
Okay. The Ukrainian government, they've started handing out Kalashnikovs, is that correct? And grenades?
Yeah, I know they've been handing out weapons. I'm sure Kalashnikovs are part of that because it's the most manufactured weapon in history, if I'm not mistaken. There's just, I'm pretty sure that's true. There's just thousands of these. They're everywhere. They're in Africa. They're in, Asia, everywhere. But yes, basically to answer your question, yes, the Ukrainian government has provided lethal weapons to civilians who have pledged to take up arms to defend the place. Yeah.
Okay. So along that line, we know that the Ukrainians are, using Kalashnikovs, and Kalashnikovs are used everywhere. What kind of weapons and munitions have you seen the Russian troops using?
Well, I've never had visual with Russians.
Okay.
But yeah, these things take place over kilometers, and what I've seen the impacts of are these things called Smersh rockets. They're launched off the back of a vehicle. They're really big and they cause a ton of damage, and they leave these maybe 10-meter wide craters. Out in Donbass, out in the east, they're constantly lobbing in, and they have been for 8 years. These little 82 millimeter mortars, 120 millimeter munitions. I think they have Iskander rockets, which are also launched off the back of vehicles. They've used cruise missiles here, and I don't see these things visually because they move really fast. And if you're close enough to see them, you're dead.
Yeah.
you see the impacts of them.
Absolutely, yeah. The courage that you guys have right now to actually have the balls of steel, quite frankly, to go up to these things and to document all this stuff. It's incredible. And yeah, no, please don't get too close to that.
Yeah, totally. I don't want to die.
No, I don't want you to die either, man. Okay, so have there been any air raids? Well, first question, can you tell me where you are in Ukraine, or do you want to keep that? Kyiv? Okay.
I'm in Kyiv. Yeah.
Okay. So, last I heard, there's been a massive Russian assault, days-long assault in that city. Has there been air raids?
Yeah, again, I'm not a military man. I see, blasts. It's just blasts and craters, and I don't know if that was a missile launch from Belarus with the range to hit here, or if it was a plane or whatever. But definitely, the Ukrainian government puts out air raid warnings. So I assume that means planes are involved. But again, I just hear the booms and see the craters, and I'm not in the radar room or whatever where they're monitoring the origins of these munitions. But when they say the government says air raid, I assume that means air raid.
Okay, and when they do say air raid, do you go to a bomb shelter, or are the people safe in the bomb shelters that they're in? Have you seen anything like that?
Well, the big move is to go into the basements of the buildings and also the metro stations.
Oh.
The metro stations here are really, really deep, really deep. So that's where a lot of people are residing, frankly, with their pets and everything. It's like little tent villages down in the metro stations, which is really sad, man. I was here for 3 weeks and made a lot of friends and went on Tinder dates and all this stuff. And and now all the friends I met either had to flee or they have to hide down here like an animal. And it's it's heartbreaking. This could have been either of us,
yeah,
or anybody listening to this. So yeah, I for me, There hasn't really been anything. For the first time last night, the actual windows shook, but there hasn't been anything close enough to this part of the city that I've actually been like, all right, I got to get into the basement. We did move our Airbnb the night before last because it was right next to a building that's owned by the Ukrainian State Security Service. The SBU. I don't know its official name. Its initials are SBU.
Okay.
And that's a target. So we moved.
Wow.
But yeah.
There was a video circulating around. We're talking about this, in classes. We're talking about this everywhere. There's a video circulating around of a Russian missile just straight on annihilating this Ukrainian government administration building.
Oh, in Kharkiv? You're talking about in Kharkiv?
I believe so. Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah. But it didn't annihilate the building. It blew up a big chunk of it, if we're talking about the same thing.
I'm sure we are, yeah.
I mean, they bombed a lot of stuff, and especially Kharkiv. I wouldn't be in Kharkiv right now. Kharkiv is really getting slammed, and kind of sounds kind of sick and deranged, but it's kind of how you have to think in these situations. It's smart to be in Kyiv now because they're going to be closer to taking other cities besides Kyiv first, and they're kind of canary in the coal mine. Like, see how they treat Kharkiv or Odessa or Mariupol, and make a decision on when to flee Kyiv based off of what happens to those cities, right? Because because the Russians so far have not been doing what they're capable of. They've been fighting pretty poorly in general. Their logistics have been really bad. They had 200,000 guys on the border for months, and they were hoping on taking the capital in 2 or 3 days, and they're nowhere near those objectives.
Wow.
But what the Russian military is capable of, and which they haven't been doing, is just totally flattening civilian centers. They did that in Chechnya. They did it in Syria. And that's my principal fear for this place. It's great that the Ukrainians are defending so well. It's great that the Ukrainians are doing better than anyone expected, and the Russians are doing worse than anyone expected. That's great. But it's scary because if the Russians get frustrated and they just want this thing to be over, punish Ukraine for humiliating them, then that's what they do. They flatten cities. They murder civilians by the thousands. They've done it. They're continuing to do it in Syria, and it's a real source of concern for me, to be frank.
Wow. So tell me more about the Russian logistical failure, how the Russian army went in all high and mighty, and then they failed to capture their objectives. They have logistical failures. There's also been reports of and videos of Russian soldiers raiding markets, raiding stores for food because the supply lines are shot. And then most recently, there's been a lot of talk about a convoy that's like a few miles long that's just stuck there, I believe around 15 miles from Kiev.
Yeah.
Do you know anything about that?
Yeah. Well, first, let me say that I'm not an intelligence official, and I'm not a military man.
I don't expect you to be, man.
Yeah. So this is all just kind of me
hearsay.
Yeah, going by the news. Yeah, and it's the social media presence in this war has been really extensive. We've all watched the TikTok videos of the troop buildup for months now, and now we're watching, Ukrainian farmers carting off BTRs and tanks that have run out of fuel and that have been abandoned or whatever by Russian military. And I am not in the room when the Russian military decides who to fuel, when to fuel, blah blah blah. But it seems like they didn't do a particularly good job. And this convoy that is supposed to arrive in Kyiv, and that's a source of concern,
I'm sure.
As the British and U.S. Intelligence has said that they've stalled, and I think today even said that it's stalled indefinitely. And British and U.S. again, like countries' intelligence, get stuff wrong all the time. U.S. and British intelligence get stuff wrong all the time. But when this situation, and for the past few months, they've been pretty good. They've been pretty accurate, and it'd be great if this convoy is just stuck there, and it's if they're stuck there, they're sitting ducks, and the Ukrainians are going to light it up, and it's not every single minute that the Russians aren't in Kyiv is a minute that the Ukrainians prepare more.
That's true. That's true.
Every second is another second for the trenches to get deeper, for the barricades to get higher, for the weapons to get to the front, and good. It's keep them out.
I agree. The Russians chose this war. Like I was thinking about it earlier. They knew
totally
that this was going to happen. They knew that these innocent people were going to be slaughtered.
Yeah.
They knew it, and they did it anyway.
And that's not to say, countries do that. Governments do that. It's important to remember that governments aren't their people, that plenty of Russian people are opposed to this. And
absolutely, yes.
Plenty of Russian people are the first victims of their government. And it's important to remember that no country in the world, least of all America, is innocent of wrongdoing at some point, and especially in the case of America, intelligence failures. And I think that the Russians seem to have totally underestimated what they were getting into. I think they thought it would be a given that they could roll in here with relative ease, and it's turning out to be a big nightmare for them. And if they actually get into Kyiv, they're gonna have a really bad time.
Yeah. Wow. So have you, just curious, and last question about the Russians, but have you seen any of these abandoned, Russian military vehicles that have supposedly run out of gas, or have you seen anything like that?
No, that's not in Kyiv. That's up.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in other regions where the military is active in villages. The only major city that they've captured, which they captured it very recently today, was Kherson. But all the major cities are still in Ukrainian hands. Like when you look at a map, all the places that are colored in Russian they're roads and small villages, and that's where those TikTok videos and everything are coming out of.
Gotcha. That makes sense. Now let's switch gears here. I am Orthodox Christian, Greek Orthodox.
Mm-hmm.
This region is very close to my heart. I wanted to ask you, are the churches okay? How is the people's faith holding out?
I don't know too much about that, other than a couple of times that I've asked for portraits from, the stereotypical babushka Eastern European with elderly woman with the neck or the kerchief over her head. A couple times I've asked to take their portraits. They've held up religious icons. I've been having conversations with them about that specifically. Every church I've seen has been undamaged. I did hear that the Russians have hit one in Kharkiv.
God.
Again, I've just heard that. I'm not going to confirm it.
Yeah.
It should be easy enough to confirm online if you want to. But yeah, especially the older generation here, especially the older women are seem to be pretty religious, but I can't tell you I've been having a whole lot of conversations about that.
I understand. Yeah. It's just it's
and a couple years ago, I want to say 3 or 4 years ago, I guess he's the ecumenical patriarch is in Constantinople, or is operating out of Istanbul. He granted autocephaly to the Ukrainian Orthodox Church, so is no longer part of the same part of Orthodox Christianity that the Russians were. So that was a huge sticking point for the Russians diplomatically. I want to say that was 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah, from what I know, the Ukrainian Orthodox Church is independent of the Russian Orthodox Church. Obviously, from what I know, they still have the truth, but this isn't a religious podcast. I'm people can look that up on their own. But I did hear something about that as well. Actually, just a few days ago when I was looking it up. So
yeah, I remember being a snafu when the Russians weren't happy about it. But
yeah,
I couldn't speak from a position of expertise on that topic.
Yeah, neither could I. Okay, so my last question is about the evacuation. So you said earlier that people are fleeing the country. Have you seen, what are some of the things you've seen in this refugee crisis from Ukraine into Europe?
Well, I haven't I haven't followed the trains out to the border. I've just seen it from Kyiv, but the train stations in Kyiv have been just utterly, what's the word? I mean, it's really soul crushing. It's sad. It's people leaving their whole lives behind, and desperation and sorrow and uncertainty about their future. I don't want to say panic. It hasn't been like violent or anything, um, but just huge crowds of people trying to flood onto these trains and that can't get out fast enough. And the traffic was, for the first couple of days, all the westbound traffic was just completely gridlocked. And yeah, it's really sad. I haven't, like I said, I haven't followed them west, so I haven't gotten to Lviv, which is the largest western city. It's regarded as really safe, and I haven't gotten to the EU borders because they mostly head to Poland, Slovakia, Romania. I think some have headed into Moldova. Yeah, I can only talk about what I've seen in Kyiv, and yeah, it's horrible. And like I said, it's whether these are Ukrainians or Syrians or whatever the case may be, it could happen to any of us. It could have happened to any of us. Nobody chooses to be a refugee. There's nothing fun about it. And I hope everyone stays safe and can come back as soon as possible.
Absolutely, yeah, we are. We're all praying for the Ukrainians all around the world, and you're absolutely right. Nobody chooses to be a refugee. Nobody chooses to, go through the hell that they're going through right now. Actually, I did have one more question. In Kyiv, is it mostly military fighting, or is there equal amounts of citizens and military on the defense lines against the Russian forces?
I don't know the answer to that, and I wouldn't know how to answer it based off of how, like, in terms of personnel. I wouldn't know in terms of how many people are involved in active engagements. I wouldn't know the answer.
Here's a better question: have you seen many young men fighting, or is it mostly adults? Like, are there teenagers fighting? Is that really a thing?
No, I haven't seen anyone who I took I haven't been asking people for their IDs. It's the other way around. But I haven't seen anyone where I'm like, whoa, that guy looks too young. I haven't seen that. Like, it's everyone who's like younger than me. I'm 32, so it's even an 18-year-old kid or a 20-year-old kid with a gun. Still, they look like young to me. I remember growing up as a kid, they're like adults, but now I look at them, I'm like, oh my god. And then you got guys with gray mustaches, the whole gamut. But I haven't seen anyone where I'm like, whoa, that guy doesn't belong in a war. That guy should be on the train as a minor. I haven't seen anyone like that yet.
Okay, that's reassuring. A lot of people were concerned about child soldiers, as you usually see in a lot of these horrible, desperate conflicts. But it's good to know that you have not been seeing any of that.
Yeah,
at least not yet, and I pray that you never do.
Yeah, I haven't seen it. Haven't seen it.
Okay. Well, thank you for coming on the show. Is there anything else that you'd like to say? Any last comments?
Yeah, I think unlike one thing that just really stands out about this conflict to me, and this is just personal. Unlike Iraq and Syria, I had gone into those places when they were already in conflict. I had not let me underline and clarify, saying conflict does not belong in those countries any more than it belongs here. Conflict does not belong in the Middle East any more than it belongs in Europe. But I did go into those situations in the context of an ongoing conflict. Here in Kyiv, I was here for the beginning of it, and the shock of it was incredible. It was like turning on a light switch. The day before, the bars were packed. Everyone was at the supermarket, going on dates, bringing their kids to school, whatever the case may be, and it turned on a dime. You woke up in a different world, and just everybody should remember, count their lucky stars, because it can happen. It can happen, and it's horrible. And just remember that that nightmare scenario that you hope never happens to you just happened to 40 million Ukrainians. And
wow,
I want everyone who's listening to remember that.
Okay, well, now they will. Now they will. And thank you so much for everything you do. The courage that you have. May God bless you, and may He watch over you. May you continue to be the eyes of the world for this conflict. And it's just, it's incredible. It's incredible the work that you're doing, sir. So thank you so much for coming on the show.
I appreciate that, man, and enjoyed talking to you.
All right, bye-bye.
Bye.
I think that it should be said that journalists like Alex Lourie and many, many others in Ukraine have been keeping the world informed in an age where most legacy media outlets are just out to push a narrative and an agenda that none of us really enjoy. We have to worry about bias and slant all the time in the news, and with independent, courageous journalists such as Alex Lourie, we can rely on them to bring us the truth as it really is through the lens of their camera, which, as I said earlier, is truly the eyes of the world right now. The war in Ukraine is only intensifying, and my heart goes out to everyone over there, especially the innocent people who are caught in this bloody, bloody conflict. If you'd like to support Alex, please follow him on Instagram. The link will be in the podcast description, and you should also check out his website, which will also be in the podcast description. If you'd like to support this show, you can purchase a subscription to Surfshark VPN and secure your internet from prying eyes. You can't afford not to protect yourself in this day and age, but you can afford Surfshark VPN with my special deal of 82% off plus 2 free months. So you really don't lose anything. I mean, it's 2 free months starting your subscription. So seriously, check it out if you want to support the show, and check out Alex's Instagram and website if you would like to see his amazing work. Don't forget to share this podcast with your friends, your family. It's available anywhere podcasts are streamed. It's on Spotify, it's on Apple Podcasts, and you can even ask your Amazon Alexa to play it. You just say, "Hey Alexa, play a more perfect podcast hosted by Dylan," and she will. It's really freaking cool. And, as always, have a more perfect day.